Hi everyone, welcome to this YouTube channel. Today I'm speaking with Koritnik. Hi Rok, how are you?
Hi Levi, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Rok and I have been discussing many astrological topics over the last 18 months. And today we decided to talk a little bit about Vargas. Vargas is typically used in Vedic astrology, but also we find the use of divisional charts in the classical Hellenistic sources, but perhaps less prominent. And so Rok has written a really interesting series of articles which you can find on his website about Vargas. Perhaps we can tackle the Hora and its connection to the Chaturtamsa, and then the Drekkana and its connection to the Navamsa. For people who don't really know, what is a Varga?
Okay, yeah, a Varga is basically, or should we say first, an aṃśa is a portion of a sign, of a zodiacal sign, and there are different rules how to divide a sign into different number of parts. And it is usually considered that each division, each division by its number is connected to a particular topic or helps us to get an insight into more specific things.
Yes, because that's a question as astrologers we get all the time is, when you have two people born at the same place at the same time, I mean, how are we going to differentiate, astrologically speaking, and see how we can astrologically determine how these lives are going to be so different? Because every 2 hours the ascendant sign changes. So when you're born, babies that are born in the same hospital are going to have the same rising sign.
Yeah, I mean, for such differentiation, we need a division that is very time sensitive. So a very short aṃśas or parts of a sign that change within minutes. So we can, by that we can theoretically differentiate twins who are born just a few minutes apart.
In 2 hours time, right, the rising sign changes. But in some of the Vargas, within that 2 hour time span, the ascendant can change up to 150 times. And then if you can include the house cusps, which are the focal aspect of a house, then every 8 seconds some cusp changed in some Varga, approximately. So when we look at the signs as a group, the rāśis as a group, when we look at the house cusps as a smaller group, then we can look also at the divisional charts, which is cutting up the zodiac basically, and then look at the cusps in these portions, then we get a real unique arrangement.
Right.
So,
I mean, we can say that we are getting a microscopic view into the birth chart by doing this.
We have the rāśi chart, we have the natal chart. Why would we cut up the zodiac? I mean, what is it exactly that we're doing when we, for example, cut up the zodiac in let's say two pieces, right? And then we do 3 pieces.
Okay, I mean, the catch is in the question that you're kind of asking, that each sign is 30 degrees long, and if we have a planet, in those 30 degrees, can we say that throughout the whole sign this planet has the same qualities or not? So the idea of cutting up a sign, some say that it's as old as the zodiac itself, and many are of the opinion that the Dvadasamsa, which is the 12th division, is the oldest one, because it's kind of something one would naturally think about. Because if we have 12 signs, and if imagine that you were an astrologer born 2,000 years ago or even more, and you're now developing a system of astrology, and you have 12 signs, and now you come up with the idea that you would like to cut this into smaller portions just to get a more microscopic detail, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So this was, some say, was the first division. Yeah, so this is the Dvadasamsa division. The 12 parts of a sign. Dvadasha is 12 and aṃśa is a part, so 12 parts.
Mm-hmm.
And what we can see that each sign is divided into 12, but it's not that each of the signs start with Aries again, but each one starts with the Dvadasamsa of its own sign. So Aries starts with Aries, Taurus starts with Taurus, Gemini starts with Gemini, and so on, and then they just proceed in the natural zodiacal order.
Mm-hmm.
And this is we find this even back way back to, we can trace it to Babylonian astrology, and it was a very commonly used division in both Hellenistic and medieval Persian astrology as well.
Right. So what did they use it for? What was the purpose?
Yeah, the purpose was just to get an additional insight into what the planet is doing, because what they usually did is that they marked the positions of planets in these 12 parts. For example, say you have a planet here that falls in the second Dvadasamsa of Aries, they would mark it in a horoscope as being in Taurus.
Mm-hmm.
So some would mark it inside the chart, some would mark it outside the chart. But it was like treated as sort of an invisible part of the planet, by which the planet is being present in that house, although that first we just see it here in Aries, but we can say, but it's also present in Taurus by its Dvadasamsa position.
Yes.
So if we have a planet in Taurus and our first planet arrives to Taurus by the 12th part, by Dvadasamsa, it conjuncts that planet through his invisible Dvadasamsa position.
Right.
So the use was not specific to any topic, like we find, for example, in Paralytic Hora Shastra, that the Dvadasamsa is, you know, for parents, grandparents. But here it was just more a general. It had a very general meaning, you know, almost on par with the positions in the rāśi chart.
Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the differences in constructing Vargas, because here we have this set of rules playing, but then there's also ways of constructing Vargas by, for example, assigning planets and so on.
Yeah, for this I will go back and we can just look at them one by one. Starting with the largest of the divisions, which is called the Hora. And I will also put, okay, just a little bit later. So the Horas are described in all the Indian classics as being ruled by the sun and the moon. So here we have, if you look at the sign of Aries, for some reason I have the zodiac placed with the signs of the luminaries on top when I work with this, so it might take a little bit of time to adjust. Aries is over here. So the first Hora of a male sign is ruled by the sun, and the second Hora is ruled by the moon. And for female signs, it's the opposite. The first Hora is ruled by the moon and the second by the sun. And it then repeats throughout the signs.
Yeah, so here we see that there is a different approach playing. So here we assign planets to certain portions of the sign of the Hora here.
Yeah, here we no longer have signs. So this is the description of the Hora that we find in all the classics. Just sun, moon rulership. But then some texts, like the Yavana Jataka, for example, they in addition to this Hora, they are describing a Hora where the first Hora belongs to the sign itself. So in this case, the first Hora would be Aries, and the second Hora belongs to the sign that is 11th from it, so it would be Aquarius.
Right. Yes.
But it's not that they look at the signs, that they would say, oh, this is Aries, this is Aquarius, but they say, no, this first Hora is ruled by Mars, which is the ruler of Aries, and the second Hora is ruled by Saturn,
yes,
which is the ruler of Aquarius, of the 11th sign. So again, they would put planets as rulers of these portions.
Right.
And they would not consider if a planet is, for example, in the second Hora of Aries, they would not say it's in Aquarius, but they would say it is ruled, its Hora ruler is Saturn. The example of this Hora, the Sun and Moon Hora, the ruler is the Moon.
Exactly.
So there are two different Horas, probably made for reading different things, but we don't know what exactly it is because the texts don't say, and it's up to us today to kind of rediscover it.
Right. So going a little further with this, we see that we have a polarity playing between the sun and the moon. So knowing that, this is our first clear hint. We were talking about polarities. We're also talking about the division of each sign into two parts.
Yes.
And of course, we also can make a harmonic Hora, which then uses the natural order of the zodiac. And by combining these rules, we can come to certain conclusions in terms of what is this division actually used for, because we're talking about a division of two.
We'd just like to present this from Saravali of Kalyan Varma. I've chosen this text because the descriptions of the Vargas are pretty much in one place, and basically he just expands on the writings of Varaha Mihira, who was there before him. And what is interesting is that first he gives explains the constructions of the Vargas that we are kind of used to today, but then adopt the following method: convert the longitude into minutes of arc and multiply the Varga figure concerned, divide the product by 1800. The resultant figure will reveal the required Varga. This is actually a simplified method of calculating the so-called harmonic or parivriti Vargas, which we will look at now. So basically he says, okay, these are the Vargas that we know, but actually there exist different Vargas also that are constructed differently.
Yes.
But this is the only time in his text that he actually mentions them. There are no further instructions whatsoever what to do with them.
That's a red thread throughout all these texts. If you look at the Parashara Hora Shastra, Jaimini Sutras, they give all these rules and rules and rules, but the practical application is always up to the person. It's the same with yogas, for example, planetary permutations. You look at combinations of planets. This is a sutra in itself. If you look at a yoga, or if you look at a hora, or if you look at any divisional chart, the idea is the same idea as a sutra. And that sutra, it contains so much information that we have to think for ourselves and find out what we can actually do with it based on what is presented to us, right? Symbolically and also in terms of geometry.
Brihad Parashara Hora Shastra gives us two different Horas. First describes this type of hora with the sun and moon rulership, and then says that the rāśis, the signs, repeat throughout the zodiac twice in their natural order. And this basically gives us what is called a Paralytic Hora, where we're no longer splitting a sign into parts, but our primary goal is to split the circle, the whole zodiac. So I have drawn the line here from Aries to Libra. And we can see, if we follow the sequence of the horas, that the zodiac repeats 2 times in the whole circle. So one zodiac from Aries to Libra and another one from Libra to Aries.
Exactly.
So here one zodiac is no longer 360 degrees but 180 degrees. And this is where the idea of creating Varga charts comes from. Because obviously from this we cannot create a chart, right? Because all we have is sun and moon.
Yes.
So here we're just concerned with the rulers. But here, theoretically, we can create another chart. Say we have a planet in the second hora of Aries and a planet in the second hora of Libra. Basically, they are sharing, they are engaged together in a specific geometrical relationship of what we would call an opposition. So if we would create a Varga chart, what would we do? We would basically fold the zodiac, or cut it and stack these two 180 degree zodiacs on top of each other. So if we have planet here in the second half of Libra, and if we stack this zodiac on top of our first half, it would appear conjunct with the planet that's positioned in the second hora of Aries.
Right, so the Parivriti Varga shows the geometric relationship between planets in the rāśi.
Exactly. It's basically another way of looking at aspects.
Yes.
Because if we look at the hora chart and 2 planets are conjunct, but this means in this type of hora, the Paralytic Hora, it means that in the rāśi they are in opposition.
And it does also suggests, well, it shows actually clearly that if we want to construct a new chart in terms of, for example, looking at aspects and so on, the only sane, logical rationale is by following the natural order of the zodiac.
Yes, I will demonstrate this through Chaturtamsa and Drekkana. Okay, so the Drekkana, this is the division of a sign into 3 parts. And what we usually read, the lords of the decanates are, so the first Drekkana is ruled by the lord of the same rāśi. So here it's saying the lord, it's not saying the sign, but the lord of the same rāśi. Then the second lord is of the 5th rāśi, and the third lord is of the 9th rāśi from the rāśi in question. Which brings us to this. So if we look at Aries, of course the first ruler is Mars, because it's the ruler of the sign. The ruler of the second Drekkana is Leo, because it rules the 5th sign from Aries.
Right.
And then we have Jupiter, which rules the 9th sign from Aries. So basically what we have here is the trine rulers. The rulers of the trine, of the signs that are in a trine, they rule the 3 portions. But today most people do this. They say, oh, the first Drekkana is Aries, the second Drekkana is Leo, and the third is Sagittarius. And they construct a Varga chart from this. But this triangle shows that we cannot see that it's not true, as we have shown in the case of the Hora, of the Paralytic Hora, that we can discover geometrical relationships between planets because we do not have the same thing going on, you know. First of all, if we connect the three, what some would say, Aries Drekkanas together, we do not get an equilateral triangle.
Yeah.
So we can just dismiss the idea that any kind of geometrical relationship can be discovered when constructing a chart. Plus, you know, we can see that our zodiac has been completely cut and rearranged.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, so I would label this as a contemporary Drekkana, because it's not what the classics say. The classics say, as we have seen, it's the rulers of these signs, not the signs. But on the other hand, we have some commentators in the tradition that follow the tradition of Jaimini, and as we have seen that Kalyana Varma also mentions this, is the Paralytic Drekkana,
which is emphasized in Jaimini.
And we will see why, because Jaimini uses Drekkana and Navamsa as the primary Vargas. So here, if in the Hora we had the zodiac repeating twice throughout the circle, here we have it 3 times. And it's going from basically from all the trine signs. So from one fire to another fire, you know, from cardinal fire to fixed fire to mutable fire.
Yes.
So we have 3 zodiacs in natural order, 120 degrees each. And when we stack these 3 zodiacs on top of each other, we can create a Varga chart. But the zodiac that we will again have a circle or a square or whatever your preference is for the chart. But we have to keep in mind that this zodiac that we are looking at when looking at the Varga chart is not our zodiac of 360 degrees. The space has been conflated.
Precisely.
So any techniques that are space-based cannot be performed in such a Varga chart.
For
example, planetary aspects.
Yeah,
planetary aspects are purely space-based.
Exactly.
They're based on, you know, the relationship within the 360 degrees zodiac. So they cannot be used in a zodiac where space has been conflated.
I was also thinking, Rok, about Baladia Vastas, which divides the sign into 5 portions.
Yes.
And which is also completely space-based.
That's questionable because
of the degree.
Yeah. Because it's still, degrees can be translated to the Vargas, but it's a rāśi-based doctrine.
Yes.
So anything that's rāśi-based can potentially, I'm not saying absolutely, but potentially, theoretically, it can be performed in a Varga chart of these calibers.
So
the Paralytic Varga.
You're saying, what you're saying is that house cusps, I mean, which are specific points and degrees, can be used in Varga charts. I mean,
yes.
There's no contradiction there.
No, any planet or point can be used in a Varga chart, because what we're looking at is just the rearrangement of these points, because they fall in different portions.
So coming back to the Baladia Vasa, so we divide the sign into 5 portions, 6 degrees each, which is actually no problem, because it's going to be eventually coming down to a specific degree that the planet is in, which you can then translate to these Parivriti Vargas.
These Vargas are also, they are calculated with the multiplication method. So you just take the degrees of a planet as counted from 0 areas, not in the sign the planet's in. So You take the longitude of the planet as counted from 0 Aries, multiply by the figure of the Varga, so if we're calculating the Drekkana, multiply by 3 and add the result to 0 Aries.
Mm-hmm.
And that would give you the degrees, you know, in the context of 360-degree circle.
We could say that any technique that involves rulership, because of course these signs also have rulers. So how would you differentiate if we're looking at techniques and what to use what for specifically, just based on that, because we're just basing
Yeah.
the difference is in one system we use signs and natural flow of zodiac, in the other one we use rulers.
Mm-hmm. Well, one is basically used just to see which planet rules the planet in question in a particular Varga, and that's it. And then we just look at the relationship between these two planets in the rāśi chart, or, you know, what's the state of the ruler. But the Paralytic Vargas, as we have seen, by their nature, allow us to create a new chart.
Mm-hmm.
So that enables us to see deeper into the relationship between the planets, because we can again count bhavas or rāśis from a specific point in question. For example, like we can see in the Swamsha technique of Jaimini, that we count from the Atmakaraka in the Navamsa.
Right. Is there another way of calculating Drekkana?
Yes, there's another one that's popular in the West, but to me it's very questionable because it just assigns the rulers according to the descending order by speed.
Yes.
And I don't find that to be very reasonable. But that's just my opinion. In Yavana Jataka, the Drekkana is given as the first Drekkana ruled by the ruler of the sign, the second by the ruler of the 12th from the sign, and the third by the ruler of the 11th.
Mm-hmm.
So it's different. And it's present just there. And Varahamihira actually mentions it. First he describes this one with the trine rulers, and then also says, but others say that it's the first, 11th and 12th.
Can you just switch back to the one with the rulerships? Because here we clearly have an emphasis on Mars, right? Because first of all, you know, going back to, if we see how these Vargas are being constructed, we can find out what to use it for. In Hora, we had a division of, we had the polarity going on, we had the opposition going on. Here we have a division in 3. Of course, number 3 relates to Mars.
Why would you say that? Why would you link it to Mars? Due to number 3, the division into 3?
Yes, I would say that. We say, you know, Drekkana usually, you know, for siblings, but also teammates and so on. But I think it's probably a lot more interesting than that, especially taking into consideration Jaimi's approach.
Yes. I mean, even if we ignore Jaimini and the Paralytic Vargas for now, it's true that we can think, yes, it's Mars, it's number 3, and some say, well, it relates to the 3rd house because it's the 3rd Varga, which I personally disagree with. Because I think that we need not to be so much concerned with the numbers, but with what is actually going on in the zodiac. So in this case, we can see that it's based on the trines. So it's the trine rulers, both of them, this type of Drekkana with the rulers and the Paralytic Drekkana. It's all based on trines. So it's 1, 5, 9.
Yes.
So what would that translate to in Vedic astrology?
Well, that would translate to Dharma.
Probably there has to be, you know, some connection to the siblings, because what we have, we see that in each sign we have the rulers of the sign of the same element. So that would connect it, in my opinion, more to the topic of siblings than Mars would in number 3.
But the thing is also, Rok, that we have, when you look at Pisces, Mars, is ruling the end of the sign of Pisces.
Yes.
And then Mars is also repeated at the first, Drekkana
true.
of Aries. And that
It
is something
starts-
very
Yes,
particular.
it starts with Mars, it ends with Mars, and that's the same with the other one, with the descending order that I mentioned from the Western astrology. Yeah, I mean, there is, sure, I'm not denying it. It's
No,
Mars is there for sure, but I'm also trying to think in terms of what's going on
Yeah.
in the circle. So here we have the trines, and the trines, some would say, yeah, they're connected to Mars, and some would say, well, they're more connected to Jupiter.
When we see those trine relationships, I mean, it is clearly pointing to Dharma. Gemini is giving it. And also because we know that we can connect it to the Navamsa.
There are two primary divisions from which the rest of them are derived, and these are the Hora and the Drekkana. But I'm only talking about the Paralytic, the harmonic ones with the natural order, because as we will see, the Navamsas are the Drekkanas of the Drekkanas.
Yes.
So here in the innermost circle we have the Navamsas. And now if you look at the relationship, for example, we have the sign of Aries, and its Drekkanas are Aries, Taurus, Gemini. And then if we look at the Drekkana, the Aries Drekkana, we have Aries, Taurus, Gemini.
Right.
If we look at the sign of Taurus, its Drekkanas are Cancer, Leo, Virgo. If we look at Taurus Drekkana, its Navamsas are Cancer, Leo, Virgo. So this could theoretically go into infinity. So the primary, we can say that the root Varga of the Navamsa is the Drekkana. And it's no wonder that Gemini uses the two in tandem.
Yes.
And geometrically it's basically clear, and we'll see one very important thing, why I think that the Navamsa should never be used separate from the Drekkana, but they must always be used together. Because here we have the equilateral triangle, and one zodiac starts in first fire sign in Aries, and then another one starts in Leo, and then from Sagittarius. But if we look at the nonagon of that's created in the Navamsa, we have something strange going on. If we look at the first zodiac of the Navamsa and the sign Taurus, it ends just, in the first third of Taurus. It doesn't happen in the same way as we have in the Drekkana, when it ends and another one starts at the cusp of the sign. So it only happens in the Navamsas at the same points, at the same 3 points.
Yes.
But this intermediate two zodiacs, they do not start at the cusp of a sign. So from this it's evident that the Navamsa is not a primary division, because it already falls away from the first 12-fold division, the zodiac. But if the Drekkanas, if we delete this, the primary 12-fold division, the rāśis, and if we follow the Navamsas along the Drekkanas, we no longer have this problem, because the Navamsa goes, to Leo and to Sagittarius and to Aries and to Leo and to Sagittarius and to Aries and so on. So again, it ends and starts at fire signs.
Yes. So pointing to Dharma and to the whole,
Yes.
what we know of the Navamsa.
So we can say that the two show the same thing, but on different levels. You know, the Navamsa is just a deeper level of the Drekkana.
Absolutely. So what we can say then is that a Drekkana, and especially if we then use this parivriti, would be important in all affairs that have to do with our dharma. So because now, for example, Navamsa is considered the chart of marriage, but it is, you know, personally I look at Navamsa for all events, because if it is going to be an important event, then it has to be connected to who you are and your dharma, expressing what you naturally are.
Sure.
And thus also Drekkana would be important, and even more foundational, I mean, is what is being shown here. And thus also in interpretation should be always applied.
Time will tell, you know, we really need to meditate on it and try it in practice.
Looking for a prediction, for example, I mean, looking at a horoscope, analyzing a problem, let's say relating to marriage and relationships, we have to use, I mean, obviously I'm going to use a rāśi, I'm going to use a Chaturtamsa, I'm going to use Navamsa, I'm going to use Drekkana, I'm going to look for clues, I'm going to look for confluence in the whole process, in that whole process. And it is very important because the intuition is so much faster in bypassing so many things that you can't really tackle pure rationally, that I think the Vargas and the fact that we also have so many divisions are important, and also kind of facilitate, give us the opportunity to look at, you know, the thing from different angles through different glasses. And in that process, some crystallization is happening, and our intuition can pick these things out. That's my experience over the years, is that it's not always, I mean, it would be amazing that we would have one calculation giving for this Varga.
That would work every time. Right.
But the reality is not that linear.
My statement here would be that, and probably someone will want to crucify me for this, that the Navamsa doesn't have a direct relationship to the rāśi chart, to the zodiac, but it has only an indirect relationship, as we can see. The Drekkana has a direct relationship to the zodiac, but the Navamsas have direct relationship to the Drekkana, but not the direct relationship to the zodiacal primary 12 zodiacal signs. And this is something that's really, you know, keeping my mind busy lately, trying to figure out how the two really work, because I find it intriguing that Jaimini, when he calculates the Yogadas, he wants both of these Vargas to take into consideration.
Yeah, he wants to use them both for the same purpose, basically.
Yes.
So you're saying that Navamsa would pertain, obviously Nava, the number 9, has a spiritual connotation throughout all or most esoteric traditions. So in that sense, if it would not relate to the directly to the rāśi, which shows the body, which shows the concrete, you know, astronomical reality, let's say, that it would pertain more to spiritual.
That's one possible explanation, possible theory. The rāśi chart is the body, the Drekkana is the astral body, or, you know, the sukshma, sukshma sharira, and that the Navamsa is more like the causal body, the karana sharira. So it would make sense, because in order that the causal body, or some would say even the spiritual body or whatever, can enter the physical body, is through the subtle body, you know, through the ego and the mind. So it makes sense, you know, through this that we have seen here, that the Navamsa cannot directly relate to the body, you know, to the zodiac, but indirectly through the Drekkanas. This is the how the Navamsas are the Drekkanas of Drekkanas. And we will go now back to our Hora. So on the Paralytic Hora, first we just divide the circle into two parts, 118 degrees, so we have two zodiacs, and the opposition, so it's the 1-7 relationship. Usually they say, okay, the Hora is for wealth, and because it's the second division, they connect it to the second house.
Yes.
I have to say that these connections through the houses, just because of the number of the division, I don't find them particularly valid, you know.
Convincing.
Yeah, convincing, absolutely not.
Yeah.
First we have to see what's going on. So here we have 1-7 relationship, and there's also another Hora that exists, which assigns the first Hora to the ruler of the sign itself, and then the second Hora to the ruler of the seventh.
Yeah, Ernst Wilhelm is using that one.
Yes,
by the way.
that's the one that's present in Kala software. So here we have the opposition, 1-7. So wouldn't it make sense that it has to do with relationships?
Absolutely. It makes sense that the first 7 is always some kind of business relationship. Now, from the tradition, traditionally speaking, any marriage or any coming together of two people was always had that connotation as well. It was always had to do with wealth. I mean, we can see it in Indian culture, in Arabic culture also. I mean, other cultures, that when people come together, get married, there's all sorts of settlements, arrangements, and so on.
So here we have 1-7. We can say relationships just in general. But as I said before, it's the Hora and the Drekkana that are the primary two, from which the other Vargas are created. And we know that there exists a Chaturtamsa, the division into 4.
Yes.
Which is usually done like this. So it assigns the rulers of the angles. So in the case of Drekkana, we had the rulers of the trines ruling the 3 portions. But here we have the rulers of the 4 angles ruling the portions. But here again, although I have put the signs here because this is how it's presented in the Brihat Parashara Hora.
Yes.
Although the one Varga before it, the Drekkana, is said that it's the ruler, so this kind of pretty much hints that the whole text is a compilation from different sources. So here we actually have Mars, Moon, Venus, and Saturn. And we see that, again, we do not have the perfect square if we connect the Aries Chaturtamsas. But on the other hand, the Paralytic Chaturtamsa gives us 4 zodiacs of 19 degrees.
Yes.
And you see it's the natural order of the signs from Aries to Pisces 4 times. And if we go back to our Hora, we will see now that the Chaturtamsas, the Paralytic Chaturtamsas, are the Horas of Horas.
Yes.
And what gets introduced is, first we had only the opposition, and now we actually have the all 4 angles.
Yeah. Squares.
Squares. Squares and opposition. So the sign of Aries has Aries and Taurus Horas. Aries Hora has Aries and Taurus Chaturtamsas. The sign of Taurus has Gemini and Cancer Horas. And the Hora, the Taurus Hora, has Gemini and Cancer Chaturtamsas. And this is the same for all the signs. So it's basically like in the case of the Paralytic Drekkana and the Navamsa, it can go to infinity.
Right.
So basically, we can create the Ashtamsha, the 8th division, by again dividing the Chaturtamshas. So it would be, they would be the horas of the Chaturtamshas. And we would get 8 parts.
Yeah, so here we see again aspects, geometric relationships between planets will be indicated in the Chaturtamsa chart, Parivriti. The other one, the Parashara one, is what we would use for just looking at the ruler.
And the rulers, right.
I think these Parashara Vargas that are not Parivriti Vargas are very powerful in my experience. But when you look at a chart, when you want to construct a chart and you want to also apply these techniques which pertain, like for example, aspects and so on, we're going to have to, it only makes sense using the natural order of the zodiac.
Yes, but only aspects that are based on the
signs. Yeah, exactly.
Not the degrees, not the space-based aspects.
Tajika aspects are originally sign-based.
Because they come from the Hellenistic system, because the Persian system was the continuation of a further development of the Hellenistic system, and the Tajika system was basically an Indianized version of the medieval Persian astrology, with some Indian elements added. So originally, the aspects that we know that are familiar to Western astrologers, you know, the opposition, sextile, trine, and squares, were sign-based. And the rule was that the two signs that have something in common, they are in aspect. They can have a relationship. Yeah. For example, in trines, we have, if we look at Aries, Leo, and Sag, all of them are masculine signs, and all of them are fire signs. So they share polarity and they share element, you know, the triplicity. So they can engage, you know, they have the electricity flowing,
yes,
so to speak. And then for squares, for example, if you have Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, all of them are cardinal signs, so they have modality in common.
Yes.
And then the opposition, Aries and Libra, both of them, they have the same polarity. They're both masculine, and they're both cardinal. And the sextiles, which is Aries and, so we don't go through all of them, Aries and Gemini, they share polarity. They are both masculine. But the signs that are next to each other, they don't have anything in common. So Aries doesn't have anything in common with either Pisces or Taurus. They don't share polarity, they don't share modality, they don't share triplicity, so element.
Yes.
And the same goes for the signs that are 6th and 8th from it. So Virgo, sorry. Virgo and Scorpio, they don't have anything in common in terms of these three qualities.
So in terms of the Chaturtamsa, following the same rationale, we have a division of each sign in 4 parts. We see it's a Parivriti, so we follow the natural order of the zodiac, but we see squares, oppositions, active. So
yeah, if we would cut this into 4 zodiacs, as we have in the case of Chaturtamsa, and layer them off top, planets that are in opposition or square in the rāśi chart would appear conjunct in Chaturtamsa.
Traditionally, Parashara gives real estate, also wealth, which makes sense, right? When we look at Hora and then Chaturtamsa.
Because we're dealing with the squares, we're dealing with the angles, the 4 pillars of our life, you know, so ourselves and our self-development and our environment and the relationship and home, you know, and the career, you know, It's the four angles, you know, first, fourth, seventh, and 10th.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just a theory. The relationships as seen from the Chaturtamsa might be more in terms of, you know, the 10th house, the angular, you know, people with whom we take some actions together, you know, because it's important to also consider the nature of the square as the geometrical shape. Before, in the Drekkana, we had the triangle, equilateral triangle, which is a very perfectly stable shape. But the square is not, you know. If we have a square box, you know, a cardboard box, it collapses right away, you know, if we don't provide some kind of support, you know, to prevent the angles to collapse. It's a very unstable shape. It has a tendency to morph into another shape. So what we need to do is just to introduce a triangle into one of its corners to stabilize it. So it's a shape that pushes us into action, you know. It's not something that stays put. It has a tendency to morph. And this is why the angles, you know, and the square aspects in Western astrology are usually considered, you know, as tense aspects, you know, that push one into actions to do something. While the trine is something that's, you know, just more natural. So, you know, the Drekkana is the trine, and we can say that the Dharma is something that's very natural to us. It's our natural duty.
Yes.
You know, it's not something that we have to artificially produce. It's something that it's naturally embedded in us.
And the fact that we act on things and our capability to act on things would be indicated or could be indicated by a Chaturtamsa stuff, more than just actually looking at, you know, what is my fair share, what is my wealth, how willing am I or how capable am I of taking action and producing because that's what the square traditionally represents, right?
Yes.
It is a manifesting aspect.
Yeah, I would definitely look at the Chaturtamsa for career.
Exactly.
You know, today we use all kinds of divisions, you know, but here we have seen the divisions that we have looked at are the ones that are mathematically complying to our primary 12-fold division, which is the zodiac, the 12 signs, because 12 is divisible by 2, by 3, and by 4. But it's not by 9. And this is the reason why that it's so. We have seen that the Navamsa is not directly related to the zodiac, to the 12 signs.
We look at rāśi, we see 3 debilitated planets, let's say. We look at Navamsa, all 3 of them are in a good dignity in the Navamsa.
Yeah.
So if we say, you know, Deha, rāśi is Deha, the path of the body, that represents the body. Then we look at Navamsa, which is implicit and showing connections to a part of our being which goes beyond and which has also the power to transmute and is kind of like the doorway, the key to changing first on an energetic level our destiny, which is then pouring through the physical dimension.
So what I'm thinking lately is that what you have said, yes, we see the 3 debilitated planets and they're in fine condition in the Navamsa. That's all great. But I would say that it's also important to look at these planets in the Drekkana and to see their Drekkana lords in the Navamsa.
Yes.
Because we need to go through the Drekkana to the Navamsa, you know, not necessarily just look at, okay, let's just look at these planets in the Navamsa now. Oh, wait, there's another stage in between, you know.
I think when we look at these planets, for example, take the same example, you know, it really shows a lot of promise in terms of people going through difficult circumstance indicated by the rāśi, and then that planet on some level will propel the person into acting in a way that facilitates growth, and that eventually will have an impact on the physical dimension. But let's please not forget the Varga in between, which is Drekkana, which
is, after all, has to do with the mind,
Exactly. If you look at a planet in good dignity, I mean, like, let's say an exalted planet, the opposite side is its fall. So we have a strong relationship between the two, and these opposites obviously have an underlying unity, a truth. And if you look at, you start from an exaltation position, if you look at the whole yin yang symbol, it has, all the good has also all the evil, all the bad in it as a potential, not necessarily coming through, but as a potential. So the same with dignity, I think. For example, when we look at the planet in the debilitation in the rāśi, if you look at the Hora, it could be either in exaltation or it could be in debilitation, right? Because it's only dividing that part into two. Dignity shows us very strongly how we come into the game, so to speak. And that's how I look at it now, because I see so many screwed up charts in terms of dignity, and then so amazing charts, and it just doesn't add up always. If you look at a planet, for example, in debilitation in the Navamsa, often it pertains to marriage stuff for many people. It does play out as a weakness, as a debilitating quality. It's just going to be a time where you will be confronted with an aspect relating to that planet that you're going to be challenged by, because you're really deeply unconscious of whatever it is that planet signifies in relation to your marriage, for example.
I agree, but I would also add that it's not so black and white when it comes to dignity, because just now we could see the manifestation of two very dignified malefics, Saturn and Mars in Capricorn. And just look what we have, a state of complete control, basically. One exalted, one in its own domicile, in its own sign, and it's just one big mess. I mean, it's not even a mess if you look at it. It's just a very strict imposition of laws, and very much Saturn, Mars in Capricorn. So were these two doing something really great because they're dignified? No, they just had a very good opportunity based on their placement to exercise their cruel nature, basically, to set up this worldwide rigid system of control, So it's not that a planet that's dignified will necessarily produce positive results. It can, if it's aspected also by favorably placed benefics, But on the other hand, and in this case, the aspects of the benefics were not present, and Jupiter was even totally trashed. So, they could really, be, how I would say, exalted in a cruel way. But the same goes for debilitated benefics, the other opposite. If a debilitated benefic has an aspect of well-placed other benefics, then that debilitation will be a constructive one, We can't say that a debilitated Mars will act in an inappropriate way always. I mean, with benefic aspects, it can create an incredible cook,
Yes.
So it's a very, I don't think it's really possible to nail this down to specific rules, but one just needs to have the eyes to, gauge the whole thing and see what are the other influences in the rāśi chart, but then also, of course, in the Vargas. The Vargas can be of great help for this.
Exactly. And also, for example, if you think about the end of the First World War, we had the flu, the Spanish flu, which killed 30 to 35 million people. We had an
Yeah.
exalted Jupiter at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Completely opposite. So Pluto was in the opposite sign, Jupiter was exalted. The nodes were also in opposite signs of what is happening right now. So there should be, you can always make these connections. But I think that debilitation and debilitated planets or dignity works very well in horary astrology.
Uh-huh.
Because you're looking at a question in the moment. Or this is off topic, but you just let's
No,
proceed.
it's good that you mentioned it.
It is working because you see at that particular moment, I see this plant is in debilitation, this plant is doing really is not a good plant, and you connect those. But then when you look at natal astrology, you look at the whole life of a person, and then you're going to say Jupiter is debilitated, it's going to create eternal problems for you. Doesn't make sense at all. It is where you kind of, in my opinion, start the game. This is like when you look at it at a wheel, where are you on the wheel? Where are you coming in? We're coming in at a point, a low point. So from that low point, you can only go up and grow into something. Or are you coming in from a high point, like a extremely highly dignified plant? But then also you can experience or being seduced by going to the shadow side of what that planet may represent, because anything has that polarity. I mean, that's what we see in the foundation of the chart, is we have constant opposition. I mean, this is the law that is our universal law, right? The law of opposition. Hora and then Chaturtamsa are pointing to opposition, pointing to squares, would be fundamental in how we direct our energy and how we manifest things. And then, as you say, you have all these trines going on as well. So you have Gemini is pinpointing these oppositions, these squares, the sextiles and trines connected to Drekkana. It's a territory that hasn't been explored enough. I mean, I know Ken Rose started stressing on it.
The thing is that we do not know the rules, because even for the regular, so to say, for the regular Vargas, which are about the planetary rulers, for example, just go back, the Chaturtamsa or the Drekkana, the simple Drekkana of the planetary rulers. We actually have so little information on how to use it in the classics. Very few techniques, I mean, just incredibly few, incredibly little. And we just have to, think about it, meditate on it, and, come up with the techniques that eventually will work, because the classics just do not say it. And today, unfortunately, what I see happening in the world of Vedic astrology, the use of the Vargas is mostly inspired by Brihatparashara Hora Shastra, which has become like the standard text. And mostly what's written in the classics, which I believe are earlier than the Parashara text, is kind of ignored, So it's just the Drekkana is for siblings, and the Chaturtamsa is, for happiness and home, and what is it? And the Saptamsa is for children, right? And the Navamsa is for spouse and so on, and marriage. But we do not find this in any other text, so it's very specific to only Brihatparashara Hora Shastra. So I'm remaining a skeptic when it comes to this, and especially when I see that those connections to the topics are, what we've already kind of agreed on, that it's not very convincing. They are connecting Vargas to houses. So I mean, my aim of this research is just to give some food for thought to astrologers who want to understand things that they use that they don't just take it and take everything, you know, at face value and just use it without questioning it. And I see astrologers doing all kinds of stuff in the Varga charts, constructed by the method that's not meant for making a chart in the first place. So they're making charts from the Vargas that are given in Parashara Hora Shastra, which are basically just there to determine the rulers and not to create charts, as we have seen. And all kinds of stuff is being performed in this Vargas, so it kind of puzzles me, you know, and I would like to see more critical thinking in this field.
Yeah, I think also the fact that these Vargas are so well constructed, I mean, the whole rationale behind it and so on, and then also the different ways of constructing them, it's such an elaborate thing that the techniques themselves should not be too complicated. Like, for example, I think that looking at rulerships of planets in Vargas gives a very clear result. You know, if you bring that back to the rāśi charts, it will give you information of what you're looking at. And you know, constructing, I mean, working a horoscope or working any question demands time. You know, okay, and Raul always said you have to work the charts because it has to start talking to you from multiple angles.
About the rulers in the Vargas, just to illustrate a little bit, you know, how these original techniques look like that we find in these old classics. For example, and if we go by the theory that the Drekkana is to see, you know, the relationship with the siblings, we would look at Mars as the Karaka. For example, let's simplify it. We would look at Mars as the Karaka. We would look at, you know, its placement in the rāśi chart, you know, if it's in a good house or a bad house. Then we would look at its ruler, its rāśi lord, you know, and see where the lord is, you know, favorably placed or not, and what's the relationship between the two. And then we would look at the Drekkana rulers, and see which planet rules Mars by Drekkana. Which planet is the Drekkana ruler of Mars? And then we would also look at this planet in the rāśi chart. What's it doing? What's its placement? What's the connection between the two? So that Drekkana ruler is like the final word on the relationship with siblings, or the siblings themselves. You know, so we, according to this, we can't just say, okay, we'll look at Mars, we'll look at the third lord and everything in the rāśi, but in order to really get the finer detail, we look at the Drekkana lord, but not what it's doing in the Drekkana chart, because here there's no chart, it's just the rulers, but what it's doing in the rāśi chart.
Well, if you would then construct a Drekkana parivriti, I would just go to the whole Gemini stuff, and in terms of rāśi aspects and using rāśi aspects and see how these planets can influence each other, how also the signs condition the planets. I mean, this is something that is very much emphasized. That's one of the big differences between the whole Parashara and Gemini system, is that the Parashara it talks about planets and also houses. It's very house, bhava based. Gemini is about what is happening in these signs. I mean, after all, Gemini Sutras is the oldest reference we have of the signs. He gives, you know, a very important information about each sign. I mean, connecting Aries to solving problems, for example. 5 rats and cats. We have all these connotations, but there it is also the sign that becomes a concrete thing. I know we say, you know, Parashara says the limbs of Vishnu, the signs are unconscious. They're the containers that limit the expression of a planet, but signs in themselves are archetypes. They're alive. They have the potential to create all sorts of numinous experience and expression of that. And planets are going to be integral, are an integral part of that. They represent that action. So how then we are going to connect those, like for via rāśi aspects, for example, signs and planets in signs, that's a completely different way of thinking.
Yeah.
Right? For example, you can look at the sun in the sign of Libra. I mean, you can't say that the sun in Libra is a bad placement because the sun creates all the signs.
Right.
So you can't say that that's going to be a bad placement. Now, if you look at Libra, what Libra represents as a sign, it is trade. That's what Jamie says, trade.
Mm-hmm.
So it means creating win-win. It's about relationship.
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Then the sun and whatever sun represents in your horoscope is going to be heavily involved with the concrete aspect of that sign, meaning trade. And on a deeper level, in terms of the soul and soul evolution, will express itself through Libra.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is a very different way of analyzing and judging something.
Mm-hmm. But if we go further,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I see here it's distorting. If we go further, we can say that this expression, we will find, a more true picture of this if we go further, through Drekkana and the Navamsa. So it will modify this. So we have now, okay, let's say a Libra expression. But then we can, further modify it. We can see how it's further modified by looking at the Vargas. And here we have, in the Paralytic Vargas, we do have signs. Because, what I forgot to say, and it's very important, let's not think that when we look at, okay, there's Aries in Drekkana, and there's Aries in the Navamsa, and there's Aries, the rāśi,
Absolutely.
that these three are different. No. There's only one Aries.
Yes.
There's only one cardinal fire, So, you know what I mean?
That's why we can use rāśi aspects actually in the Vargas.
Yes.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe we can later on look at some of the less commonly used Vargas and express some thoughts and ideas about that. Like for example, Saptamsha is also something very...
Yeah, I would like to talk about Saptamsha and Trimsamsha.
Let's say goodbye. Okay.
Right.
Thank you very much for being here, explaining this, all the graphs that you prepared. Wonderful. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Levi, for inviting me.
Wonderful.
It was a pleasure.
Okay, thanks guys. Bye.